Hey, thanks for joining me here on Has Entered the Chat. Today's episode features Flyers broadcaster for 30 years, Jim Jackson. He's also done some play-by-play for the Phillies for 14 years, among many other things, which we will talk about. In addition to this video, if you want to follow us on your favorite podcast platform, you can take it on the go, so you can listen in your car, in your headphones, or just while you're working in the background. Follow Jim on Twitter at JimJPhilly. You can also check out JimJacksonBroadcasting.com, where he offers broadcast coaching, audiobook and video narration. You can even have him do a cameo. It'll tell you his upcoming appearances, among a few other things. All the links for that I just mentioned are going to be down below, as well as links for the show on social media and podcasting. Let's get right to the interview, though. I'm excited for you to check it out. Jim was a great guest. Loved talking to him. Great stories. I think you'll really enjoy it. So here you go. Has Entered the Chat episode featuring Flyers broadcaster Jim Jackson.
Couple vacations outside of that.
Oh, that's good. Anywhere nice?
We're going to St. Thomas with the family. That's the big one. And then my wife and I go to New York for 4 days. We do like 4 shows, and then we got one down in South Florida. So three trips, once a month starting next month. Yeah. This month cool. I just veg.
I don't blame you, honestly. What shows are you seeing? Do you know yet in New York when you go?
Not yet. We don't. I pick out a whole bunch and then I let her decide whether or not she likes it or not. Is that mic close enough or not? I don't need to prop.
Yeah. No, you're good. I'm picking you up good. Yeah.
All right. So yeah, I don't make that decision till that's a next week project, I believe. So
we just saw Harry Potter not too long ago down there. The Cursed Child. It was good. That was the first time I was on Broadway, probably since I was a kid.
Yeah, Broadway is cool. Yeah, last year we went to see Chicago, and we thought it was gonna be Pamela Anderson. She was scheduled to be there. She had been there, but she left like the week before for a break, and so they had the understudy do it. And this understudy was this young girl who had just done a contest, basically, to get a chance to go on Broadway for a week and as an understudy. She was unbelievable. I mean, she stole the show. Yeah, and she was, because she's still young. She came out afterwards and met with everybody and got pictures. And
oh, that's cool.
Follow her. Yeah, I got her name. I got to forget her name right now, but I got her name in an envelope from that whole trip, and I got to follow her career. She's definitely headed for. She's really good.
Yeah, here you were thinking like, oh man, we're getting the understudy, and then you get a great show. That's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool. Good. Well, hey, I do at the end. I want to make sure I save some time to talk about like your broadcast coaching and events and cameo and all that stuff. But first, I want to talk to you a little about your career and everything like that. I think my first question was like, if I'm doing the math right, you probably, joined the Flyers when you're in like your early 30s, roughly. I know you Oh, cool. I know you graduated Syracuse. What kind of filled the gap there? I think you did some AHL broadcasting as well. And when you graduated, is that what you knew you wanted to do right away?
Yeah, I knew what I wanted to do when I was 12, maybe.
Oh, wow.
Once I started to realize that I wasn't going to make it as a player, and that was pretty early on, I had to find a way, because I was a sports junkie as a kid. I mean, there were no computers back then. There was no internet. There was no social media, nothing like that. But I just took. I found it actually after my parents passed, and I cleaned out their house. I found all kinds of these notebooks of mine, which had stats and stats and stats.
Oh, really?
Man, I was clearly just a sports, I was one of those wacko sports fans. So I had to find a way to stay involved, and it wasn't going to be through playing. I found that out pretty early on. So really, my whole goal from the time I was 12 or 13 was to get to Syracuse, because I grew up in upstate New York, and that was the great broadcast school, sports broadcast school. So became my goal. I got my grades up, got into Newhouse, which was tough. And then once I was at Syracuse, there was this whole change in I had probably been happy to be the sports director at a local station in Utica when I was a kid. But now, once I went to Syracuse and was around all those kids from all over the country, especially New York City, it was, I wanted to be president of CBS Sports. I wanted to go right to the top. So your motivation, your ambition really grew, and it really pushed me. And I got lots of great experience at Syracuse. But then school ends and boom, you're done. And it's like, okay, what now? And I went back home and I sent out a whole bunch of things. I got an interview at a radio station in Manchester, New Hampshire, which thankfully I didn't get that job. It probably wouldn't have gone too well. It was a news sports radio thing. And I went back and I had nothing going for a couple months. So I figured I'm just going to go into this local radio station, which I'd always listened to. It was a news sports talk station, had a nightly sports talk show that I'd always listened to. And they carried some local sports. And so I went in there and I said, hey, can I hang around for a month? I'll work for free. I'll clean, whatever, get coffee for the anchors, whatever you want. But can I just hang around? I want to be around the station and see how it goes. And probably because I was a Syracuse grad, I was also local. I'd also met the sports director once or twice. They said, sure, I'll do it. So I did that. And I did whatever I could. I immersed myself, and probably about 2.5 weeks in, they said, hey, we think you're probably competent to run the board. You can call it producing if you want, but basically it's running the board for some of our, shows that are automated. And so I did that thinking, hey, maybe this will lead to a part-time job or something. And by about the 3rd week, they said, we're going to have you host, or at least to produce our Polish radio show. Our person's out on Sunday and we need you to do that. And that was literally, Adam, the start of my broadcast career, because, and I'll never forget it, Maria Kowalski was her name, lovely Polish lady. She'd point, I'd play the polka, or I'd read the English commercial, or I'd do whatever she wanted. But that was my first actual on the air commercial thing, and that Polish radio show is why I've been doing the Flyers for 30 years. And here's why, a very short version. As I was doing that, I did it a couple of times. They kept me on a little bit over my month, and then they said, hey, you'll always be somebody we'll hire on a per hour basis to ride the board. But as I rode the board on the weekends, I realized they went from a news talk sports station to, after the Polish show was over on Sundays and all day on Saturday, they were a top 40 music station in and around the sports they carried in the weekends. And I said, hey, this just doesn't make sense. So here I am just out of school. I put together this written proposal for a sports talk show around their sporting events in the weekends, and who else to host it but me? I'm already there. And they went for it. I mean, I got him into a meeting. He was the sports director, news director, program director, general manager. And here I am, this 22-year-old kid. And I had this, I don't know how good the written proposal was. I don't have it. I lost that somewhere. But that
would have been a good thing to frame.
Yeah, because it got me a full-time job. They gave me the job. Of course, my social life was gone. I worked from noon to midnight, Saturday and Sunday. And then they gave me 16 hours during the week, like helping out the sports director, helping out in the newsroom, and got me to 40 hours. But I had a full-time job. And about 6 months after that, the sports director got a job in Birmingham, major upgrade at that point in terms of market size. And so I became the sports director. Now I'm doing Division I college basketball, Utica College. I'm doing high school football. I'm doing New York Penn League baseball. And I'm doing what at the time was ACHL hockey, plus a nightly talk show and sportscasts, and getting tons of experience. I'm 23 years old and just loving it, getting reps and reps and reps. About 9 months after that, the New Jersey Devils decided to move their American Hockey League team to Utica from Portland, Maine. And we get the rights. So now I'm doing AHL hockey at like 23, almost 24.
Wow.
And I did every year the Devils played, Utica Devils, 6 years, 499 games. Never got a sniff of the NHL, but about the end of that 6th year came word that they were going to leave. I had switched radio stations to stay with the hockey too, about 3 or 4 years into that. But the bottom line was I was still doing AHL hockey. I was still doing baseball. I wasn't doing the talk show anymore because this station was more, they wanted me to sell. And so I was selling, which I hated, but I had to do it to keep up doing the games. And then the Devils decided the rumblings were they were going to leave. And so I was just married and kind of in the crossroads. I had lots of offers for sales jobs, some of them 6 figures, which in upstate New York is like $1 million in a big market. And, I could have just settled into that pretty easily and been comfortable. My wife would have been happy. She loved it up there, but I had this passion for sports, and I just thought I was good enough to do something. I sent tapes out to Florida and Anaheim, the expansion teams that year. And on the bus ride home from our last game with the Devils, after we got eliminated in the playoffs, Robbie Ftorek was the coach of that team. He's a U.S. Hockey Hall of Famer. He's a crazy guy. And it was a friend of mine, but we always battled. And he he's having all the players come up, sit next to him, go over what they're going to do for the summer. And he pulls me over because he got done a little early, I guess. I mean, I didn't even work for the team. I worked for the radio station, but pulls me over and says, "So what are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, rumors are that you guys are leaving town." And he kind of just looked at me and said, "Yeah, that's probably true." I said, "Well, I've sent tapes out to the expansion teams, and I'll keep my eye on any other openings, and I'll send tapes there." He goes, "No, send tapes everywhere." I said, "Well, those end up in the circular file. Where are they going?" He goes, No, you really should send tapes everywhere." And so I fought him on it, of course, because that's how Robbie and I. But when I got home, I thought, why not? I don't have anything to lose. Of course, back then it wasn't just putting a link in an email and sending it out. It was I had to put a physical tape together, snail mail it out. So I had to listen to myself 22 times the same stuff over and over again. But I did
a lot of
got them all out. About a month after that, the Ducks, they were the Mighty Ducks, then call and say I'm in the final 3 for the radio job, 2-1. I got the job. That was probably July. And so, they were an expansion team. I was negotiating with them. Not that I had any real leverage. I was going to take whatever they offered me, but it took them forever. They had so much going on. And in the meantime, I took a job in Utica just to pass the time before I figured out what I was doing, working for the Colonial Hockey League team that had replaced the AHL team. And I was in the sales office there, and I was on the phone with Ken Wilson from the Mighty Ducks, and he's saying, "We're going to get this soon. I promise you, we're going to get to this soon." I said, "Great." I hung up, and the message came in on one of those sheets. It said, "Mark Piazza, Philadelphia Flyers, line 2. I said, "Philadelphia Flyers? What would that be?" And this is months after I sent the tape. So I pick it up. I say, "Hey, Mark, how are you?" Jim Jackson. He goes, "Hey, how are you?" I said, "I'm doing well." He said, "Listen, we got some changes in our broadcasting department. Mike Emmerich is leaving to go national and do some stuff with New Jersey. We're going to move Gene Hart back to television, and we need a radio voice, and we have this tape, and we really like it. You're in the final group." And I just started laughing. And he said, "Normally I'd be offended." He says, "I know why you're laughing." And I said, "You do?" He said, "Yeah, you're already talking with the Ducks. So, these people know all these things anyhow."
Right.
And I said, "Yeah, I am. I've kind of agreed to take their job." He goes, "Well, have you signed anything?" And I said, "No." He says, "All right, come on down tomorrow. We'll interview you, and then we'll see what happens." So they interviewed me. Basically, he told me as I'm going to the interview, "Unless you spit in the guy's face, you're getting the job. They really love your tape." And I didn't spit in Ron Ryan's face at lunch. And I went back home. They had a contract waiting for me on the fax machine.
Oh, wow.
And for a lot of reasons, my mother-in-law at the time was sick, so it was going to be much easier for my wife to get back and forth between Philly and Utica as opposed to Los Angeles or Anaheim. So
it's a little closer, yeah.
Yeah, and Eric Lindros was going into his second year. Of course, the Flyers were going to win Stanley Cups before the Mighty Ducks were going to win a Stanley Cup. I was wrong there, but no regrets on this decision. I chose Philly. Very happy. First 2 years radio, then switched to TV. Now 30 years total, and just absolutely love it. So I'm living my dream. I tell my broadcast coaching students all the time, have a dream, have a goal, have a mission, shoot for it. You're going to have people tell you you're crazy. You're going to have people tell you you suck. You're going to have people tell you it's not for you. You are the person who will make that decision. Hopefully that day never comes, but nobody else is going to tell you that. I've had many people tell me I was never going to make it. My own mother fought against this almost to her death. And, there's just, we all have different people that we're going to have to fight to accomplish our dreams. And I teach that to people all the time. And I tell them my story is one of them. I had a dream since I was like 12 years old. It didn't matter whether it was hockey, basketball, football, baseball. I was a 4-sport guy, not so much soccer back then. So it was, the 4 sports and any of those 4, NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball, NFL, I would have taken any of them. And so hockey kind of found me, but the bottom line is I realized my dream, and I realized that every day that my feet hit the ground and I have a game, I'm living my dream. And they can too. I mean, I was a graduating class of 73 people in upstate New York. I mean, people are telling me, well, yeah, you're going to be in my yearbook, actually, senior yearbook quote is, the most pleasure in life comes from doing things people say that you can't do. Now, that's not to mean you go out and get into trouble. That's to mean you do something they don't think you are capable of doing. And and I did it. So I tell all my students, it can be you. It can. For me, it was hard to believe back then. I saw people in the big, who made it in broadcasting saying, "I'll never make it there." There was part of me that said that, but at the same time, I kept pushing, and I made it. So I say that to all my students: it can be you, and you just have to have that desire. You have to work at your craft for sure. You do need some breaks. I clearly got some breaks, but you also make some breaks. I clearly made some of my breaks too. So that's really the way it works.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, you have to obviously, it's not just going to fall in your lap, right? So you put in the work, just something as simple as, and I really like your story because, even just in the podcasting realm that I've been doing for like 10 years, I've noticed that, just take a shot, right? So you put that proposal together, not knowing they could have said no, but guess what? That's the worst thing they're going to do is say no. And they said yes. And
they could have laughed
that,
me out of the office too, but
and if they didn't do that, you wouldn't be where you are today. So I mean, you took that.
And what if they say no, or what if they do laugh me out of the office? I go out of there saying I gave it my best shot.
Right.
I mean, even to this day, I did a game on Friday, a week ago today, for TNT, Game 6, Panthers Bruins. I did as good a job as I possibly could do in that game. I was happy. Rarely am I done with a broadcast where I'm not thinking about, could have done that better. Jody and I, it was a great game, crazy game, all kinds of stuff. It was just great. I just had a great feeling about the broadcast. I didn't get to the second round with TNT. I'm not the least bit disappointed because I know I gave everything I had into that broadcast, and I thought we did a good job. I couldn't do much better. So if they didn't move me on to the second round because of that, they were never going to move me on to the second round, and they weren't. They have their 4 play-by-play guys. So I get all kinds of people tweeting me, "Why aren't you doing the second round of this?" And I'm like, because I just wasn't part of I wasn't there on the totem pole, but I did everything I could to try. And, that's a decision that networks make. And they had their people that they kind of used during the season. John Forsland and Alex Faust had filled in during the season. There are two main guys, obviously, are Kenny and Brendan Burke. So you do the math. There's just not a reason. But so happy Jody's getting at least one game in the second round because he's really good. And I think he should be way higher up in the national totem pole for analysts. So good to see that. And for me, I'm sitting back just enjoying the games now. My summer begins, but it's similar to back at that, all the way back to that meeting. I knew by submitting that proposal, by being there in the first place, asking them to hang around for a month, but just I did all I could. If it didn't happen out of that, I could look back and say I gave it my best shot. And I tell all my broadcast coaching students, you got to give it your best shot, because if you don't, you're going to regret it. And life with regret is terrible. You don't want to look back when you're 40 or 45 and say, why didn't my dream was to be a broadcaster. I wanted to be a broadcaster, but I never really went after it. For many of these broadcast students, they won't make it to the NHL or NBA or any of the major leagues, but at least they're giving it a shot. And so when they're 40, they can say, hey, I did my best. And many people find other avenues to really satisfy themselves within the sports realm, whether it's PR, whether it's in social media, or whether it's behind the scenes in television or radio. So, it's one of those things. You got to shoot for it in order to get there. What is it Wayne Gretzky said? 100% of the goals, the shots not taken, do not make it into the net. And in golf, never up, never in. So, you have to absolutely give it a shot.
Yeah. And when you took that Flyers job, all those years ago, did you think that you would still be there today, this many years later, and your career path, or your career would have taken the path that even doing some Phillies work as well?
Yeah, I mean, I can't. To be honest with you, I hoped for it. Did I know it would be the case? No, I knew I was only 30 when I started. So, doing the math, I figured if everything goes well, I'm going to be here 30 years, because you start thinking about retirement at that point. Sure. But I knew there would have to be a lot of breaks. I knew Mr. Ed Snyder would have to like me. And I knew that, that I'd have to do a really good job. So there was some pressure, of course, to get to that stage, but that was my goal. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I wanted to be a longtime announcer for one team, and I'm right up there now. Sam Rosen's the king, but I think there's not too many guys who've been with one team doing television as many years as I have in the league anymore. So there's like 5 maybe. So I'm pretty proud of that. And yeah, I absolutely didn't think it was going to be. I'm sure certainly not presumptuous enough and cocky enough to say that, but that was my goal. I wanted it to be the case. And as for the Phillies, I had done a lot of baseball in the minors when I was in Utica. I loved it. It was always a passion of mine. And when I got down here, you're all excited, and I dove right into hockey from like 93 through maybe 2000. And then I started to get the baseball itch a little bit. And then the lockout came in 2004, 2005, and I sought out the Trenton Thunder. I sought out anybody in the minors, to be honest with you, to do some work, make some money too, because we weren't getting paid. So, and I got to do AA baseball that summer of 05. And once I did that, I was right back into the baseball love affair. And David Montgomery and I had been having lunch once a year or so, starting in maybe 2003, 4, somewhere around there. And we were always just talking, nothing about me, more about broadcasting in general, baseball, hockey. 1 hour spent with David Montgomery makes your life 1 hour better. Let me tell you, he was one of the best people I've ever been around in the sport. So we did that. And then once I started doing that, he said, hey, do you ever think about doing some baseball? And then by 2007, I was doing Phillies, and I did it for 14 years. So that was fun. Now that I think about it, I was crazy. I was working for 14 years, pretty much 365 days a year. And I was let go by the Phillies during the pandemic. No doubt about the fact that this was not a mutual party of the ways. They told me I wasn't coming back. But if they had come back to me after the pandemic ended, I would not have gone back, because I realized I need the summers off. I'm getting older, and I just needed I needed to have some life. And I found that life the first year out of baseball. So as much as I thought I was going to really miss the baseball, I do miss the ballpark. I miss my buddies, the people, Scott Fransky and Larry Anderson and all those guys, and all the people around the ballpark, Ed and some of the people up in the press box who take care of you, and the people in the kitchen, all that. I miss all that immensely. I do not miss the job at all. I just love getting up today and not having to worry about a baseball game. So, so the 14 years, a long run, a good run, but I got to experience, the best. I got a ring. I got to ride in a parade. I got to see some of the best teams in Phillies history over that 5-year run. And it was just something I'll never, ever regret at all. And then I got to see how baseball can be tough, because the team went downhill. And from 2012 to my last year, 2020, they weren't above 500 the whole time. There was some excitement toward the end when they got Bryce Harper, but it was
you got spoiled those first couple of years.
And baseball, Adam, in July, August, when you're out of it, is tough. It's every day. You're not going anywhere. They're taking care of this now, but the games were endless. They were, going 3:15, 3:30. So when it all came to an end in 2020, I didn't realize it, but I had kind of grown tired of the game a little bit. I think this is all good, speeding it up. I think they're going to probably have to make some changes to help save some people and so forth. But I think getting these games shorter is a good thing for baseball. But when I was doing it, I mean, I'd be sitting there. It's like, wow, this game started at 7. It's now 10:40 and we're still playing baseball. Of course, I do the half hour before the game and then half hour to 45 minutes after the game. So, 4-hour game for me is like a 5, or for everybody is like a 5 to 5.5 hour thing. And plus you're there way ahead of time. And so, I mean, it wasn't hard work. No announcing is hard work. We are all blessed to be able to do what we do, but it was a lot of work. It was a lot of hours, and I'm using those hours now to swim, golf, go on vacations, see Broadway shows, things like that.
It's a little more enjoyable than a late baseball
game.
Get
to that stage of life, Adam. It really is. I mean, I love baseball. Nothing like the sound of the crack of the bat and the ball into the mitt and all that, and just all those great things about baseball. It's a great sport. I'm not here to say baseball is bad. I loved it, but I probably had enough time with it. 14
Sure.
years is a long run.
Yeah, and I think this year even I saw one of the Phillies games was like just barely over 2 hours, which
It
is
was 202.
unheard of. I
Yeah,
mean, in terms
they're
of
getting
baseball.
there.
So
I mean,
yeah,
watching it, I haven't watched too much of it, but it's almost too fast. I dare to say that. I've
yeah,
complained
yeah,
about the
no,
length of the games for so long, but I mean, it's almost like what would Vin Scully do with the baseball now in terms of trying to tell his stories? It's from a
yeah.
broadcasting standpoint a little tougher to tell stories now, but that's not a complaint. The game should be quicker.
Yeah, I mean, they're gonna tweak it, and 2 hours is like fast for any sport. Football even takes 3 hours most of the time, but for some
Yeah,
reason, those baseball games that drag out. But that's
yeah.
that we could spend probably a half hour just talking about that. But so for your broadcast with the Flyers, I know you work with Keith Jones, a former Philadelphia Flyer himself. He played 8 years, I believe, in the NHL. In the NHL, he had some time in the AHL before that, but given that you have been uh, in the booth so long doing the Flyers, and that he's a former player and now broadcaster, do you guys have any kind of like friendly competition with who knows more about hockey or who knows more about the team?
No, that wouldn't be part of Jonesy's MO. He does not
Okay.
fool around with the fact that he's not like this, immerse himself in stats to get ready for a game. He is basically an analyst by instinct, and his instincts are amazing.
Yeah.
He does just because he loves the game and he'll watch games, pick up a lot of stuff, but he's not one of these guys. I mean, part of my broadcast coaching is this whole sequence of preparation. That's not Jonesy. And he makes light of the fact that that's not him. I give him my notes, in fact, just so he has some information in front of him. But he is really, really savvy and funny. One of the funniest, most quickest witted.
Yeah. He's very witty. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got this wit that's just amazing. So he has plenty of great attributes that make him a very good announcer. But he's not one of these dive into all the stats and get all prepared, which is probably a good thing because you don't really need an analyst giving numbers. I've heard some do it. It's like that's really for the play-by-play guy.
Right.
It's what I'm the what, and the analyst should be the why. And Jonesy and I don't usually get in the way of that. Once in a while, I'll sneak in with a little bit of why. He'll give a little bit of what, but for the most part, we stick to our lanes, and I think it makes it a good partnership.
Yeah. And he is very humorous and, like you said, witty. I remember, up until a few months ago, listening to him on the, local sports radio morning show. Super funny guy. I mean, was always and like you said, the wittiness on him, like just without missing a beat. He's right on with the jokes. So
He
I'm
is.
sure
He's got his bad puns ready at all times.
right.
But no, he's very good at using words to make fun of it, and we both talk about it now. You've got to be pretty careful today because
Right.
we're in a highly sensitive world in terms of what's said and what is caught on mic and all this. Jonesy and I have been caught with a hot mic too, and but when you're on mic and you're trying to be funny, a lot of times when you're trying to be funny, you can get yourself in trouble. So you have to be as careful as you can be. I don't think there's any way right now to get through these things without offending someone from time to time. It's too bad, but there are lines you can't cross.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, you talked about it a little bit with the Phillies. They went, your first couple seasons, just tremendous success, but then they went through that rough patch of, not making the playoffs, and like you said, the games would drag on. And the Flyers, currently not in the best situation. I have heard you say you think they are getting there, headed in the right direction. But how, much does it affect you and your job when a team is really good versus when they're on the opposite end of that?
Keeping things in perspective, Adam, again, anytime my feet hit the ground and I have a game to do, even during those lean years for the Phillies, and if people call these the lean years for the Flyers, I'm still really pumped up to be doing a game because I'm still describing the actions of some of the best athletes in the world and getting paid for it. So it's a pretty good mix. But sure, when the team is winning, I mean, adrenaline carries you. I mean, that game last weekend in Florida, it was such a great game. I was just pumped with adrenaline. Whereas some of the other games I've done nationally, 6-2, 4-1, that's more you're worrying about getting everything right, and the adrenaline isn't part of it. And then when you're broadcasting for a team, for sure, when they win, you're pumped. I mean, you're human. People would be silly to think that when I'm calling a Flyers game, I'm not rooting for the Flyers to win. I'm around the players all the time. I know the players. I know the coaches. I've been calling the games for 3 decades. Of course, I'm going to be rooting for the Flyers. But 90 to 95% of the people watching are Flyers fans. So I'm broadcasting to largely Flyers fans anyhow. So I'm not trying to be biased. It's just natural when you're around a team that much, you're going to have a bias for them. Now, I've done Flyers games for national networks where I had to split it down the middle and did my best. It takes effort. But that didn't make Flyers fans too happy when I was getting excited for other teams' goals against the Flyers. So you have to watch that. But in general, just is it easier when your team's winning? For sure. When they're losing, you have to find something to make the broadcast interesting, whether it be prospects or just human interest stories or what have you. And that's work. When you're winning and they're winning, you just have to call the games and everybody's entertained. So it's much easier when your team's winning. But when I'm broadcasting the last 3 years, Flyers haven't made the playoffs. There's always been things to be interested in, and stories, players, and the hope that things are getting better. Obviously, there's always something to grab onto.
Yeah, and what's interesting about broadcasting the various sports, I feel like, and maybe this is just coming from an outsider's perspective, hockey is, to me, is probably one of the, on a basic level, more difficult sports to broadcast, because just having to learn all the different names and the correct pronunciations, you have a lot of difficult to pronounce names. I mean, I feel like that's a little bit underrated in broadcasting in general, but was that kind of something? I mean, I'm sure now you're probably pretty efficient at it, recognizing where a player's from and how the correct pronunciation is. But was that something that took some time to kind of get used to and make sure? Because the last thing you want to do is say somebody's first or last name incorrectly, not only for them, but just, for professional purposes.
Yeah, and it's not getting any easier, Adam, because a lot of players, European players, Americanize their names. Some don't. So I always go to the player when I can to ask them, how is your name pronounced? Now, when we're doing a game in Florida, let's say the Flyers are playing Florida, and we get in the night before and we get to their morning skate, I might not get the chance to go to that player and ask him how to pronounce his name, but I can at least go to their announcers who are around him all the time and say, hey, the NHL puts out a pronunciation list. It's not always right. They had Nicholas Obey Kubel wrong and still do. It's Kubel, not Kubel, which is what in the and there are others. The most famous one, of course, is Brad Marchand of the Boston Bruins. So getting a chance to do a game nationally gives you much more access. And I was able to actually, before my first game of that series, talk with Brad and say, Brad, you've been in the league 14 years, 13 years. Your name has bounced back and forth. No one seems to know. Your radio guy calls it one thing. Your TV guy calls it another. I'm going to pronounce your name however you want me to pronounce it for the rest of your careers right now, as you tell me. And he says, well, here's the story. And he basically told me he was Marchand from the time he was a kid growing up all through his formative years, got to the NHL, and it was suddenly Marchand. Everybody was calling him Marchand. He just didn't feel like it was of his to tell everybody, hey, it's Marchand. So he let it go, and it kind of became both. And I don't know how it got split between the radio guy and the TV guy, but that's another story. But anyhow, I said, so what is it? What do you want now? And he goes, I would say Marchand. And he says, and to firm that up, I asked my 8-year-old niece a couple months ago, her last name is Marchand. How does she want her name pronounced? Marchand. And the 8-year-old said Marchand. So that cemented it. So, okay. So he's Marchand. And I go with whatever the player tells me. Now, hockey does have a lot of European players. There's one on Florida. His name is Eetu Luostarinen. That's how we've been told. I have not talked to him specifically, but I've been told by their announcers, anyone around the Panthers, that's how it's called. It gets butchered on national TV on a nightly basis. Luostarinen, It's Lostarinen. That's how you pronounce his name. So it is tough because there's so many of them, and you can't talk to every athlete on the other team, especially when you're doing local broadcast. But you do what you can, and you try to confirm as many as you can. And on my sheet, I put the phonetic spelling. So when I go over the numbers, I'm saying that name correctly every time, so that hopefully it comes out correctly when I do the game. But it's not always that easy. Peter Nedeljkovic, goaltender for the Red Wings now, at least most recently. I struggle with it. I can say it to you now a zillion times, but in the speed of a game, he makes a save. I'm butchering it. Save by Nedeljkovic. It's just one of those names. So we all have those that get us. One of my funny stories with Jonesy, Andrei Vasilevsky made his NHL debut against the Flyers. I believe it was his debut in Philadelphia. And at the end of our broadcast, Jonesy's usually talking with the producer in his headset saying 10, 9, 8, and he's counting it to the rollout, which I then start talking over, which is highlights of the game leading to saying goodbye. Mm-hmm. But he has to hit that rollout just like he's hitting a commercial break. And he was having trouble with Vasilevsky all night long. And it's probably because of the way it's spelled. It's not a hard word, but there's an S-K-I-I-Y, I think is how it, but something got Jonesy, and he just couldn't. He was struggling with it all game. He was saying Tampa Bay goaltender, whatever. So he gets to the end, and he's our star of the game. He was great. Big surprise. And so he talks about the player of the game leading up to the rollout, and they're showing saves and saying, great save. And he clearly was the difference in this hockey game. And in the end, the Lightning win this game based on 38 saves by Vasa Tampa goaltender. and then the rollout starts, and I got to talk. And I'm like, okay, Vessel, Tampa. And there was so much resignation in his voice when he goes Tampa goaltender. It's like Tampa. He just couldn't get it out. So we all have our name. Yeah, he's got it now. He's had to say his name a lot over the last 5 or 6 years. So he's got it down now. And I have Nedeljkovic down a little bit, but still I worry about it when the Flyers are playing him. So that's you're going to have those. You do your best with it. As far as hockey being the toughest sport, I get that a lot from people. And I used to get a lot, what's tougher, hockey or baseball? And I was doing both. And I used to tell them baseball by far, and they'd be like, really? And I said, the reason is it's almost with both sports like it is playing the game. When you play hockey, you can't really be thinking out on the ice. It's almost a complete instinctual sport. So you practice, you get muscle memory, and you go out on the ice, and if you're thinking, it's too fast. If you're thinking, you're lost. So that's basically how you call a game too. I do all my prep. I do probably way more than I have to do, but I know going into the game that I feel ready for just about anything, even though in live sports you can't be, but you get ready you feel like you're ready for anything. If you feel like you're ready for anything, that's the most important thing because you're in a zone for the broadcast. But my work is done then. Memorization, all that stuff is done then. Game starts. I can't be looking down to the sheet with every number. You just can't. The game's too fast. Right. It has to be in my head. And all of what's happening is just your ability to process and speak clearly and crisply and quickly. So you do it. It happens. Game ends. I'm rarely tired at the end of a hockey game. I mean, I just called what I saw for 2:15, 2.5, and it wasn't much mental stress. Baseball, as a player, is all about what's coming next, right? The batter, what's the next pitch going to be? The pitcher's looking into the catcher, what's my next pitch going to be? The infielders, what's the next pitch going to be? So I can, if it's a breaking ball, I can, slant one way. If it's a fastball, the other way. Outfielders, same thing. If someone's on the base paths, where do I go if the ball's hit there? All this is stuff in your mind before the pitch is even thrown. And as a broadcaster, you're almost doing the same thing. There's not that much action to call in baseball. Well, they've been studies like 12 minutes during the course of where the ball's actually in play. I think that's gone down seriously lately with the three event game we have now, strikeout, walk, home run. But I think we're hopefully getting out of that as well. But you see what I'm saying. As a broadcaster, you have to be thinking about all the stuff that's going on. And people look at a baseball game that don't really know the sport, and they'll say nothing's going on. The guy's throwing the ball, the guy's hitting the ball. No, we all know there's so much going on. Shifts, whatever, how you're positioning your outfielders, the bullpen. You always got to keep your eye on the bullpen, what's going on out there, the chemistry between the pitcher and catcher. There's just so much going on. The coaches, the first and third base coaches, what they're doing. There's so much going on. So when I would fill in for Scott Franzke and do a full 9 innings, I'd also do the pre-post in full 9. So it was a full gig, but I was exhausted by the end of that broadcast because it's a little longer. First of all, the game's a little longer, but second of all, you're basically talking and having to come up with things to say for 3 hours, whereas hockey, the game gives you everything to say. So you're thinking a lot more. So I've always thought baseball to be a tougher sport. I mean, hockey might be tough physically. You can either do it or you can't. Some people can't talk that quickly. Some people can't process that quickly, and they're not going to be hockey announcers. But the bottom line is, in terms of mental duress, if you will, I think that hockey is actually easier than baseball. But you got to do the work ahead of time for hockey. I mean, if you don't do the work ahead of time for hockey, you're going to be swimming upstream the whole game. So you're going to have a lot of mental stress. But if you do your prep, hockey should be just once the lights go on, the puck is dropped, it should be almost like automatic for you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and the paces between the two games are just night and day almost.
Yeah, I used to tell people would say, what do you like more, baseball or hockey? Not which is tougher, but what do you like more? And I tell them the story of my 2 kids. My daughter is a 5'2", maybe, blonde, very petite girl. My son is a 6'1" brunette hockey player, big, brawny kid. My daughter is very organized, very into what's going on around the world, maybe a little bit self-centered, very clean. Room is really clean. My son, not as organized. His room's a mess. He's worried about everybody but himself. He's this very caring kid. They're complete opposites, my 2 kids. They're opposites physically, they're opposites mentally. But do I love one more than the other? No, I love both of them. And I say that about baseball and hockey. You couldn't find 2 sports really that are much different. And yet I love both of them equally because I love the pace, the excitement of hockey, and I love the marathon nature of baseball, the stories that are evolving over the course of a long season and over the course of a game, and just that poetry that baseball brings. So I love both sports for opposite reasons, but I don't love one more than the other.
Yeah, and I think actually, it's pretty impressive that you can make that change because, obviously the broadcasting, I just feel like in baseball, there's a lot more, not empty air, but there has the potential for a lot more empty air that, people sometimes fill with stories or, just find different things to talk about to stay relevant. Whereas hockey, there's not quite as much of that break. I mean, you still have some here and there, but with baseball, I feel like there's sometimes you get like when you get a really good broadcaster, you're engaged in what they're talking about in addition to the game.
Oh, you have to be because again, what is there? 12 minutes of actual action. It's
right.
the best baseball announcers are not necessarily the guys who call the action the best. They're the ones who fill the time between the action the best. I mean, Vin Scully was the best of the best. And he also could describe plays very well, don't get me wrong, but his storytelling is what made him the GOAT in most people's eyes. Whereas Doc Emrick, many people feel he is the GOAT of hockey announcers. It was his ability to describe the action, the frenetic pace, and to somehow, some way take a great game and make it even better, or take an average game and make it good. But he would do that. He'd up that game some level. That's the goal of any broadcaster. Don't get in the way of the game, but somehow make it a little bit better for the viewer or the listener. And, obviously both Scully and Emrick are legendary for how they did that, but it's completely different how they did that. Vin, it was with his dulcet tones and his just great stories and his way of, weaving that into the game. And Doc, it was just his ridiculously amazing, entertaining calls and how you'd hear his voice and know, whoa, this is big. And, your eyes would be glued on the TV. So, it's different for the 2 sports. And so not surprising it's different for 2 of the best announcers for those 2 sports.
Absolutely. And so before I let you go, I do want to talk a little about your broadcast coaching. And so JimJacksonBroadcasting.com, I'll throw the link down in the description for anyone who's interested. But what, kind of what process do you go through when you're coaching somebody, or, what's your maybe biggest thing that you see that is a common, something that people need to work on that is very common among people you coach?
Oh, that's a tough one. There's so many different things. Bottom line, I mean, this started in the minute the Phillies let me go. I wanted to find some way to fill some of the time. And so it was November of 2020. I started coaching, almost 3 years already. It's hard to believe, but and so we started this. I had always talked to people in the business. People call, email, and just have a brief conversation with them, maybe listen to their clips, whatever. But this gave me 3 hours, an hour, 3 segments to really dive into the business with them and then dive into their specific situation. And I've probably had upwards of 75, I think, students over the course of the 2.5 years, which is pretty good. I mean, I basically push it word of mouth. I don't have any huge advertising campaign. I don't know how to use the search engines very well. So it's basically, that's how I get people, but I love it. I dive in. I dive into each student in terms of their story, just like I dive into getting ready for a game, the broadcast. I want to find out as much as I can about them, where they've been, where they are, where they want to be. And then we try to help them get there. And as far as a specific thing, I tell everybody it's about preparation. It's about getting experience, and it's about perseverance. Pep, I call it my pep speech. You have to do all those. You have to be over prepared. I don't think you can be over prepared, but you have to over prepare, if that makes any sense. Sure. And experience, there's no such thing as bad experience. People are saying, of course there is. I mean, I would say myself, my 2.5 years, whatever it was, 3 years of selling up in Utica, I hated it with a passion. So was that a bad experience for me? Yes. But in the rearview mirror, as I look at it, it was great experience. It helped me with interpersonal skills, cold calling, nothing better to help someone learn how to communicate with people than cold calling, because they hate you. They don't want you. They don't even, and you got to go in there and at least somehow find a way to, by the time you leave there, not be getting kicked out. So yeah, I mean, the sales, I hated it, and I'm thankful I didn't have to get into it for a living, because it just wasn't my gig, but I learned from that. So that makes it good experience. A bad experience can become good experience, if that makes any sense. And I think that's the case throughout, because if you learn something, Adam, the key is learning something. Life is a learning experience. We're learning to the day we die, I think. And so if you go through something and learn, it's a good experience. It might be you learn something about yourself. It might be you learn something about a company. It might be you learn something about a certain realm of the business. It might be something as simple as you learn something about a particular person that's in the business, whatever. But if you're learning something, it's good, because that's what life's all about. We have to learn to get better. So experience, and then perseverance. I mean, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. You're going to be told you're not good. I was told by the sports director at the station at Syracuse when I was at school, when he was a senior and I was a junior and he was a senior, who had just gotten a Sports Illustrated article written about him saying he was a 9 out of a 10. So we were kind of genuflecting in his presence after that story came out. Shortly after that, he told me I was not going to make it in this business. And it crushed me for about 48 hours. And then I sucked it up and I said, I'm not going to let this guy tell me that I can't make it. Why should I'm at Syracuse? I'm on the air. I'm doing play-by-play. I got to be halfway decent. I'm not going to let this guy tell me. And I used his words as motivation instead of as a way to crush me. And I did meet him many years later, 2010, when Phillies were in the NLCS, and he asked me to be on his radio show out in San Francisco. And I went on with him. And before we got on the air, I said, "Do you remember telling me I was going to make it?" He says, "I never told you that." I said, "Yeah, you told me that because it resonated." He goes, "I never said that. But you're welcome," he said, because I said to him, it gave me motivation instead of crushing me. Right. So you're going to have those kind of people, Adam, in your life. and whether it's your mother or whether it's somebody at the outside telling you don't do it. You have to persevere through that. Bumps in the road, they're going to be there. Obstacles you got to get around, they're going to be there. And you just have to push through them. So that's my pep speech in a nutshell. So for one thing that everybody does wrong, I can't say there is one thing. Everybody has their strengths and their weaknesses, but if you hone in on those three fundamentals, you'll be much better off.
Yeah, I totally agree. I like it. And again, for anyone interested, JimJacksonBroadcasting.com. Again, links will be down in the description.
Also on my website there, Adam, you've got lots of different choices. The broadcast coaching one is obviously for the coaching. And then I got a YouTube channel, which I started, but didn't do much with yet. Trying to figure out what to do with that. But I got Cameo, and I'm also doing voiceovers and audiobook narration. And there's charitable link to Alex's Lemonade Stand, which is very near and dear to me, which any donations to that are awesome. So that's all on the website. But the one that specifically coaching, there's a link there. If you click on that, you'll get all the information.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention Cameo because Cameo is pretty cool.
It is. I just did a couple before we went on here today. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you get some crazy work. Cool you really do. I mean, you get cool something introducing them at a wedding. It's like, really, you want me to introduce them in a wedding through a Cameo? And the birthdays and the anniversaries and the get wells are awesome. But seriously, you have some of these guys where you're kicking off their fantasy football league or their fantasy hockey league, and it's crazy. But I love it. It's a great way to interact with people. And yeah, I've been doing this a long time. I don't think of myself as a celebrity. I just don't. I just have a hard time thinking of me that way. But if people out there do, and anything I can say can help someone who's not feeling well, let's say in a get well message, or help pump somebody up who's going through a little, bout of depression, or just make their birthday a little bit more special, why not? It takes 30 seconds to a minute. And I think it's a great way to interact. And for me, I've been doing it for a year and a half now. Yeah, about a year and a half. Flyers haven't been very good. So I get a lot of these, please tell me that they're going to be a little bit better. So I kind of feel like Cameo / psychiatrist.
Yeah, right.
trying to tell them that there are better times around the corner. So I get a lot of that too, but it's all fun, and I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, and I think I saw one, because if you go on the Cameo, you can see some samples and stuff for anyone listening who wants to check it out. I know one of the videos I saw was maybe a Pee Wee hockey team or something like that had done it, which was really funny. It was cool to listen to. So
yeah, they had me do one where they gave me all the names of the players and they wanted me to construct a goal call. So there's all kinds of crazy ones.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a cool little thing. Do you have any upcoming events that you'll be out at? I know sometimes the Flyers run events that you probably are at. Anything that you know of upcoming?
Not right now, because no one was sure how long my season was going to go until about 3 days ago. So they will add up. I got out of golfing when I did the Phillies, so I miss a lot of the golfing events. I'm thinking about getting back into golf, so you might see me. You might want to avoid me in your foursome, though, because I'm just getting back into it, and I'm not that good to begin with. And then there's going to be some things through either the Flyers, NBC Sports Philadelphia, or Ed Snyder Youth and Education. Last year there was a fishing trip that I got COVID for right before, so I couldn't go on. But I was scheduled to go on, and there was some other things we did. We did some hockey stuff, and there's all kinds of events, and that's all on my website as well.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and I'll throw I think you're on Twitter, so I'll throw that link in the description down below as well, so anyone interested can check that out. Thanks again for watching. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. This way you get all the alerts for new interviews as they pop up. And also subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. This way, if you're in your car, on headphones, you can still listen to each episode. All social media links for the show and for Jim will be down below in the description. But again, Twitter at JimJPhilly for him, and JimJacksonBroadcasting.com for everything that we talked about in the interview. Thank you for watching again, and hope to see you on the next one.